"You're serving your garage food at my wedding?" My cousin Brittany laughed, her professionally whitened teeth gleaming under the reception hall's crystal chandeliers as 200 guests turned to witness my humiliation. "How embarrassing!" Aunt Lorraine whispered loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, adjusting her mother-of-the-bride corsage with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. I just smiled, wiped my hands on my chef's apron, and continued plating the appetizers, because in exactly 17 minutes, a man in an unremarkable gray suit would stand up from the corner table and say 12 words that would silence every person who'd ever called my food worthless. "I'm from the Michelin Guide. I need to speak with the chef immediately. But let me tell you how I ended up cooking at a wedding for people who despised me." I grew up in the Delgado family of San Antonio, Texas, a sprawling clan where success was measured by two things: money and the appearance of money. My mother's side had both. Aunt Lorraine married a real estate developer. Their daughter Brittany drove a BMW at 16 and summered in Europe. My mother married for love, a construction worker named Miguel who made her laugh and made ends meet barely. We were the poor relations, the ones seated at the back during family reunions, the ones whose Christmas gifts were noticeably cheaper than everyone else's, the ones Aunt Lorraine tolerated because blood was blood, even when that blood was diluted by economic disappointment. I learned to cook out of necessity. Mom worked double shifts as a nurse's aide. Dad's hours were unpredictable, feast or famine depending on which projects were running. By age 10, I was responsible for feeding myself and my younger brother Marcos. By 12, I was meal planning on a $40 weekly budget. By 15, I could transform a chicken, some beans, and whatever vegetables were on sale into a week's worth of meals that tasted like someone actually cared. Food became my language, my rebellion, my art form. While Brittany took tennis lessons and SAT prep courses, I watched cooking shows and experimented with flavor profiles. While she toured college campuses, I worked the line at a local restaurant, learning from a chef who saw potential in the quiet girl who never complained and always showed up early. "You have a gift," Chef Martinez told me after I'd been there 6 months. "Your palate is exceptional. With proper training, you could do something real." Proper training cost money. Money I didn't have. So I did what I could. I learned on the job, read every cookbook the library offered, practiced techniques in our tiny apartment kitchen until I could execute them in my sleep. At 19, I started a catering business from my parents' garage. Garage food became Aunt Lorraine's favorite insult. She coined the phrase at a family birthday party when I'd brought homemade empanadas and someone complimented them. "Oh, that's just Marisol's little garage food project," she'd laughed. Cute for potlucks, but hardly professional. The name stuck. Even as my client list grew, even as I catered corporate events and birthday parties and small weddings for people who found me through word of mouth, I remained the garage food girl to my family. Brittany was the worst. 3 years older and eternally aware of the hierarchy, she never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place. "Still doing your little cooking thing?" she'd ask at family gatherings. "That's sweet. Some people just aren't meant for real careers, I guess." "My business cleared 6 figures last year," I said once unwisely. She'd laughed. 6 figures? Marisol, I spent 6 figures on my engagement ring. It's all relative, isn't it? I stopped attending family events after that. I had a business to run, clients to serve, a reputation to build. I didn't need their approval, and I'd stopped wanting it. Then Brittany got engaged, and everything changed. The call came from Aunt Lorraine, which should have been my first warning. "Marisol, darling, we have a little situation." Her voice dripped with the false sweetness she reserved for requests she expected to be refused. "Brittany's caterer canceled. Some emergency with their restaurant, a fire or something. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and we simply cannot find adequate replacement on such short notice." "That's unfortunate," I said carefully. "Yes, well, someone suggested, and I want to emphasize this wasn't my idea, that perhaps you could step in. Just for the basics. Appetizers, maybe a few courses. We'd bring in a real pastry chef for the cake, obviously." There it was. The insult wrapped in a request. "You want me to cater Brittany's wedding? Want is a strong word. But your family, and family helps family. Think of it as a contribution. Of course, we'd cover ingredient costs. No labor fee. No recognition. Just ingredient costs, and the privilege of serving people who'd spent years mocking my work." I should have said no. Instead, I said, "I'll do it, but I do the full menu. Every course, including the cake. Silence on the other end. Then, fine. We'll see what you can manage. 3 weeks is nothing in catering terms. For a 200-person wedding with a 5-course menu, it's practically impossible. I called in every favor I'd accumulated over 7 years of building my business. My sous chef Marco worked 18-hour days alongside me. My pastry specialist Diana created a 7-tier cake that pushed the boundaries of her considerable abilities. I cashed out my savings to afford ingredients that would make even Brittany's snobbish guests reconsider their assumptions. This wasn't about impressing my family anymore. This was about proving to myself that I could execute at the highest level when everything was on the line. The menu was my manifesto, elevated Texas cuisine that honored my heritage while demonstrating technical mastery. Smoked brisket crostini with chimichurri and queso fresco. Seared scallops with mole negro and pepitas. A main course choice between chili-rubbed ribeye with sweet corn puree or miso-glazed halibut with coconut rice. Each plate designed to tell a story about where I came from and where I was going. The night before the wedding, I didn't sleep. I reviewed every detail, prepped every component, visualized every potential disaster and its solution. This was my moment, whether anyone recognized it or not. The wedding venue was a restored plantation house outside Austin, the kind of place that cost more to rent for a day than my parents' annual mortgage. I arrived at dawn with my team, set up our station in the industrial kitchen, and began the intricate dance of timing that separates amateur caterers from professionals. The ceremony was at 4. Appetizers at 5. First course at 6:30. Every minute accounted for, every task assigned. At 4:47, Brittany appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was stunning, I'll admit, $15,000 worth of wedding dress, hair and makeup by artists who'd been working on her since noon. She looked like she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine. Her expression, however, was pure contempt. "You're serving your garage food at my wedding?" She laughed, gesturing at my team plating appetizers with surgical precision. "I cannot believe Mother actually went through with this. Do you know how important these guests are? State senators, tech executives, and you're giving them street food from your parents' garage." Brittany, her new husband, appeared behind her, looking uncomfortable. "Maybe now isn't." "No, Derek, she needs to understand." Brittany stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. "If you embarrass me today, Marisol, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of operation you're running. Health department, social media, everything. Do you understand?" I met her eyes calmly. "Your appetizers will be ready in 3 minutes. I suggest you greet your guests." She stalked out. Her husband mouthed sorry before following. Marco appeared at my elbow. "You okay, chef?" "Perfect. Let's plate." The appetizers launched flawlessly. I watched from the kitchen doorway as guests bit into brisket crostini, and their expressions shifted from polite tolerance to genuine surprise. A woman in Chanel actually closed her eyes and made a small sound of pleasure. A man I recognized from local news grabbed 3 scallop portions and guarded them from his wife. "How embarrassing," I heard Aunt Lorraine whisper to a nearby guest. My niece insisted on catering. We're humoring her, obviously. The real food comes later. There was no real food later. It was all mine. First course landed. Then second. Each plate left the kitchen as a work of art and returned empty. The servers reported that guests were asking about the chef, who trained her, where they could book her, whether she had a restaurant. I allowed myself a small smile and focused on the main course. At 7:15, during the entree service, a man in a gray suit flagged down one of my servers. He'd been seated at a corner table, not part of the wedding party, probably a +1 or distant connection. I'd noticed him earlier because he ate slowly, deliberately, examining each component before tasting. Now he was speaking intensely to my server, who nodded and walked toward the kitchen with an expression I couldn't read. "Chef, there's a guest who wants to speak with you. Tell them I'll be available after service. He says it's urgent." "He says." She paused, checking a note she'd written on her order pad. "He says he's from the Michelin Guide." The kitchen went silent. Marco froze mid-plate. Diana stopped piping and stared at me. "What?" "I'm from the Michelin Guide," the server repeated. "I need to speak with the chef immediately." I walked into that reception hall in my stained chef's whites, hair escaping from its bun, smelling like smoke and mole and 12 hours of relentless work. The man in the gray suit stood as I approached. "Ms. Delgado?" "I'm Jonathan Hartley." I work as an inspector for the Michelin Guide's North American expansion. He extended his hand. I apologize for the unusual circumstances. I was invited as a guest of the groom's family, and I had no idea the catering would be this extraordinary. He gestured at the empty plates around him. I've been evaluating restaurants across Texas for 18 months. This catering job, is among the finest I've experienced. Your technique is classical, but your flavor combinations are entirely your own. The mole alone deserves serious recognition. I was vaguely aware that the tables around us had gone quiet. That Brittany was staring from the head table with an expression of confused horror. That Aunt Lorraine had stopped mid-conversation, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. I don't have a restaurant, I heard myself say. I run a catering business. Out of my parents' garage, technically. Jonathan smiled. The Michelin Guide doesn't evaluate garages, unfortunately. But we do have relationships with investors who are always looking for talent to back. He produced a business card. If you ever decide to open a brick-and-mortar establishment, I'd consider it a personal favor if you'd contact me first. I believe you have Michelin star potential, Ms. Delgado. It would be a privilege to help you achieve it. The silence in the room was absolute. Then, from somewhere near the back, someone started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, 200 guests were applauding, and I was standing in the middle of Brittany's wedding reception receiving a standing ovation for food my family had spent years calling worthless. I looked at my cousin. She wasn't clapping. I smiled anyway. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Guests sought me out between courses, pressing business cards into my hands, asking about private events, wanting to know when my restaurant would open. The cake, Diana's masterpiece, received its own round of applause when it was cut. Brittany didn't speak to me again that night. Neither did Aunt Lorraine. They didn't need to. Their silence said everything. As my team packed up the kitchen at midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. * Ms. Delgado, Jonathan Hartley here. I've taken the liberty of sharing your contact information with 2 investors who attended tonight. Expect calls tomorrow. Also, the tech executive at Table 7 wants to book you for his company's annual gala. 400 guests. I suggest you quadruple your usual rate. You've earned it, *. I sat down on an overturned crate and laughed until I cried. 6 months later, Marisol's opened in downtown Austin. The investors Jonathan connected me with provided capital. My team from the catering days became my kitchen staff. The menu evolved from what I'd served at Brittany's wedding. Still rooted in my heritage, still pushing boundaries, still telling the story of a girl who learned to cook because she had no other choice. We received our first Michelin star within a year. Mom cried when she heard the news. Dad took out an ad in the local paper. Congratulations to our daughter Marisol, Michelin star chef, from your proud parents. I framed it and hung it in the kitchen where everyone could see. Aunt Lorraine sent a card. Congratulations on your little restaurant. We always knew you had potential. I threw it away. Brittany has never eaten at Marisol's. The waiting list is 4 months long, and I have a very strict policy about who gets reservations. Some doors, once closed, don't need to reopen. I built my own.